Welcome everyone to It Tastes Different Gaming Appetizers, and tonight we're going to talk about trophy hunting in PlayStation. Are you a trophy hunter? Well, soon life may be more difficult for you because Sony is banning shovelware and easy platinum games on PlayStation Store. So they're they're saying there's a wave of reskin games, and they're going to put an end to this. So they sent out a letter to their developers noting that shovelware games that are reskinned, non-games, and games just to give people platinum trophies are going to either be shadow banned or delisted on their ecosystem. So they're basically trying to tell developers that they need to stop doing this. So they sent out a letter, a published letter that dex.exe got a hold of. And basically, the letter states that Sony strives to ensure that customers can search and discover the full breadth of experiences on PlayStation, and that partners have a fair means of being discovered. When partners oversaturate or spam the PlayStation Store with many variants of the same game type of content, it can negatively impact both customer and partner experience. So basically, they're laying out some partner requirements and allowances that say when SIE reviews the content submitted to PlayStation Store products that have the following characteristics are identified as spam or repetitive content. Products whose functionality or assets are copied or are not meaningfully different from products already published on the PlayStation Store, irrespective of the publisher of record. Multiple concepts and product variants published by individual partners that have duplicative functionality or experiences differentiated only by minor variances of functionality or assets. Or, so they're basically saying that you can't publish anything that's just like something else that's already out there. It's going to be kind of weird. This is all going to be manual review to come up with whatever schema they put into place. They're saying what partners should do is, where possible, they should consider aggregating similar content experience into a singular product. And, using in-game commerce to expand or extend experience, which basically means more microtransactions. As an example, they use supplying different trophies for each product is not enough to differentiate content. So you have two games that are very similar with just different trophies. They're saying does not constitute separate games. It says if any devs break these things mentioned above, Sony PlayStation has said the following in a letter about the actions in place. Content or partners found to have breached policy may be subject to the following enforcement actions: content excluded from the PlayStation Store, content delisted from the PlayStation Store, discoverability on the PlayStation Store being restricted, content does not feature an automatic merchandising placement such as the new release stand, and content is not accessible and can only be accessed via direct link on web or mobile stores. Impact on certain CERDOP processes. Content is not permitted to proceed publication until policies are rectified and review slot availability is affected. So basically, if you submit too much stuff like this and they find you guilty of it, you basically are going to go to the back of the line every time you submit something new, and maybe even further in the back, right? They're going to be like, here's the back of the line, but take a number so we can put you behind the other people that are coming in, And like I said, content's taken down and things like that, and up to having your partner account suspended or terminated. Wow. That's insane, but it is what it is. It's, part of me is torn on this, and part of me is like, okay, I can get behind this, right? I hate shovelware. I don't like it. But I'm also one to kind of look at games a little bit more closely than I would if I'm buying it for my own leisure, right? If I'm looking at something to review, we're more apt to make just a reactionary purchase on a review based on popularity or something like that. But for stuff that I want to play for my personal life, I'm looking into it more heavily. So I could usually pick out shovelware stuff in there. But and then part of me goes, who are you to dictate what a publisher can do or game developer can do, right? If a game developer has a cool idea that's kind of based off a premise that somebody else had, but maybe in a science fiction setting rather than a fantasy or a reality setting, and who are you to dictate that story won't be more appealing to other gamers? This gamer may like fantasy, whereas this guy likes sci-fi. whereas this guy likes reality, whereas this guy likes history, you know, and you could skin the same game 5 different ways, and it's only appealing to people in their certain genres, right? Like you could take a history. I'm not a history guy, you know. I don't really care about historical stories and references very much. But you take that historical story and reference and translate it into a sci-fi story. I'm on board. I can get behind that, right? Plenty of companies do this. You read tons of books that are just historical tropes turned into a sci-fi story. So that part of me is like, who are you to say what can go on there? Now it's their own ecosystem, which I've got plenty of gripes about Sony's ecosystem. You know that they are basically going to kill in the future. Digital is the only way to go, and they're basically going to kill any type of creativity or retelling of the same story because of this. But that's just my opinion. It's kind of the whole you're controlling the gatekeeper to people's entertainment by saying we won't publish this because it's too close to something else, or it has potential for abuse. That's all I'm going to say. So Nick, what do you think about this, man? What do you think about the letter? What do you think about Sony and all this stuff coming out where they're basically banning games and stuff?
Well, I mean, I don't like shovelware like all the rest of us don't. I think Nintendo needs to take this letter into consideration, because if you've been on the Nintendo Switch store, it is full of shovelware. I don't find much shovelware on Sony's store or Xbox's store. Xbox's store more than Sony's, really. Sony's, when I go look through their store, it's basically stuff that I'm interested in, and I'd have to really dig deep to find the shovel. But I mean, it's definitely there. Xbox's store is kind of like, it's there, but it's not as in your face, and Nintendo's store it's all over the place. So I can understand them wanting to do this. I guess it just depends on, I don't really have a problem with it besides what you were saying with them, possibly putting games in the back of the line or doing certain things because someone takes an aspect and changes it to kind of fit a different narrative, and then saying, well, that's too relative to something else that already exists, right? It depends on how strict they are with that, right? I would assume what they mean is taking basically copy paste, copy pasting another game, which, and this changing it enough that where you can't run into like legal issues as far as infringement and stuff like that go, but being able to release it and saying this is because developers, some developers and stuff do that sometimes. They make the exact same game. I mean, you see like almost the exact same assets and stuff, except for they're slightly changed just enough that they can skirt that line. Maybe that's what Sony's talking about. I mean, I'm sure there's games on the marketplace that are like that. But it's good in the other sense that it would be helpful to get rid of shovelware. I think the Nintendo Wii ran into that issue. Nintendo Wii ran into nothing but shovelware on their system. And I think that's one, even though Nintendo Wii started out strong, towards the end of the Wii, it was just nothing but shovelware. And I think that's what hurt it with the Wii and the Wii U, is because people were just expecting more of that shovelware type stuff. So shovelware can definitely hurt, especially when you're looking for things in particular and you come across all that shovelware and everything like that. You can definitely point it out, right? If you're a gamer and stuff. But those that aren't as privy to the fact might have a hard time distinguishing one piece of shovelware compared to something authentic or good. So I think it's a good thing for them to take a look at shovelware and making sure that it is regulated in a sense, right? Because if you don't regulate it in some sort of sense, shovelware can get very crazy within a marketplace. It can become overwhelming and overrun a marketplace with just a bunch of crap that people put out there for, nothing at all. They do no effort to make anything good. They just kind of reskin some stuff and throw it out there to sell another $5 item, right? To people that don't know any better. So I think some regulation's good for them to go in there. And again, it is Sony's ecosystem, so they technically can do whatever they want to. But, will that push, will something like that? And again, depending on how stringent Sony is, will that push those developers making shovelware or other things off to other marketplaces, right? It could potentially push them out of Sony's marketplace altogether and start putting these games onto Xbox or Nintendo or just out on PC on Steam or something like that, right? But I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of torn in the fact that like most shovelware sucks, so I'm not really want to give the developers of shovelware like that much credit, you know. But like maybe there's a good game they bring once in a while, possibly, and that could hurt Sony in the long run. I guess it just really depends on how stringent Sony is with these rules, right? If it's a based on like you said, it's kind of like they're looking at each case to figure out what this is, right? If this is shovelware, does this need to go to the back of the line? Does this need to be a ban or whatever the case may be? So that's good. At least they're not having just like some AI system determine what needs to happen to all these, because that could cause a big mess. So I wonder how I wonder how that system comes about. How do they go about finding these games and doing this sort of testing and knowing if that game is something that deserves one of these rules that they've set forth?
Supposedly, from what I read, it's a manual process, so games have to be manually reviewed by people. So and I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like some point you're hampering developers' creative rights at that point. Now shovelware is one thing, but how it's somebody's idea of a game and they put time and effort into making it. So who are they to say you can't be on our? If you're not violating the norms, right? What I mean by the norms is you're not violating the violence, the sex, the gore, the nudity, that type of stuff that they put in place for their ecosystem. And all you're doing is building a game that you want to build, and they deem it to be against one of those things. Like, I don't know, man. I mean, it reminds me of it reminds me of something when I was younger. I don't even want to say names, but there was a company out there that made a game that I had did some IT work for in the past, that made a game that I thought looked a lot like WoW. I mean, it looked a lot like WoW when I did this, and this is a long time ago. I was probably early 20s at that, and it looked a lot like that, and it looked like it bought a lot of the assets from it. And I don't know whatever happened to it. I guess I haven't looked for it in a while, but it was an adventure game that used more realistic tropes, like modern, like I'm not even saying modern, but realistic items. If I say too much, it's going to kind of give it away. I'm looking here to see if the game actually released to say if I could say anything about this, but let's see here. So it doesn't look like this ever came out into fruition, because I don't know if it ever happened, but let's just say it this way. It was a video game based around Native Americans. And it doesn't look like it ever came about. So, but that was his rendition and telling of this Native American story game. It looked like it borrowed a lot of elements from that game. I don't know if it was under the table, above the table, or what, because it never made it out. So it may have been below the table for all I know. But when I saw it, I immediately thought, this is WoW. This is World of Warcraft, but just telling the adventure of Native American person, so, and that would have been them stifling him telling a story that was from a fantasy world remade with some stuff. Let's say Blizzard did this and they made it more realistic based off of real world life, they made a Native American game or a whatever game, but it used the same concepts and tropes as their WoW game. It's just, instead of it being fantasy, it's now real world. I don't think that's Sony's place to say that, but we'll see what their stringency is. Like Nick said, is it really going to be like, I came out with the same Pop-Tart cat game, I just made a Pop-Tart dog now, it's a cash grab, right? so stuff like that, or whatever, the Noon Cat, or whatever the heck that cat's name is, and now it's whatever dog. So I could see stuff like that. I think every time I always saw shovelware or thought of stuff like that was like the what was the name of that really crappy PS4 game with the tiger, Tales of a Black Tiger or whatever? That was like a mobile port, but they like banked off of crap like that, and that's what I consider shovelware. But who's going to define what shovelware is? Can anybody clearly define the word shovelware? Right? Maybe that game's fun to some people, but not to others. And I think there's already controls in place for that, right? Like I don't know what Sony's is, but like Steam and Xbox and some of the other, if you play a game for like 10 minutes and you're like, this is bad, this is horrible, refund it, and they refund it. That's the protection, right? And if you put out a game that has like 5 plays, 5 people bought it, or 20 people bought it and 15 returned it, then you're not going to show up on close to the front page because your game is just not that great. I think there's already checks and balances in place for that. I don't think Sony needs to gatekeep this. But Nintendo doesn't gatekeep it. They're the king of shovelware. So
right. And like I said at the beginning, I don't know, for me, when I look on the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store, especially, either one of those, finding games that I would consider shovelware is more difficult, right? Like the games that are presented to me is the things that I'm interested in, and more of like what's on sale or what's new and trending and what I'm interested in, what's popular. And I really have to go down into the mud to find like what it would be I would consider shovelware, right? And same thing with Xbox. Now with Nintendo, it's a little bit easier to find that stuff. It's kind of, so they already do, like you said, they already kind of do that now by putting those items kind of further behind, right? Those things that are popular are more upfront, whereas things that are not as well known or not as popular are kind of put in the back seat, which is good in one case, but it kind of sucks in the other case. But because I have come across some games that I've purchased and loved that were hard to find in the store, right? They weren't popular, so they weren't presented in the front. But once I come across them on a fluke, and I'm like, that looks really cool, and I buy it, and I'm like, this game's really fun, and it was some indie title or some title by some small publisher and developer, but it's just not in the forefront. And so yeah, I can kind of see it both ways. But again, it just depends on how stringent Sony is with this, right? How stringent, and once this starts getting enacted and starts becoming a thing within Sony, they start enacting these rules and everything. I think we'll probably find out from developers and other developers and stuff and news articles about how that's going for them, I should say.
Yep. So, I mean, yeah, it's time will tell. That's what we kind of have to wait for. I tell you, for time will tell. I hate hearing about stifling of these developers and stuff like that, but I can also, like I said, I can also get behind the keeping the plethora of 99-cent, $4 and $10 games off of the marketplace to do nothing but clog it up. But at the same point, who's to say what's good and what should be there and what shouldn't, right? At that point, you're playing a little bit of, I don't know what's the right term for it. You're just playing a little bit of, you get to play God essentially with the games, and say, you cannot exist here. You shall not pass, basically, They're gonna say who can come into their ecosystem, and it is their ecosystem. That's why digital gaming scares the crap out of me, because they get to control that aspect of things, and whether that game travels with the next gen or not, so that's kind of what scares me a little bit. But it is what it is. I mean, if you think back to Nintendo and Sega Genesis games, that happened with them. You weren't buying a new Sega or a new Nintendo console and playing the old cartridges because the carts weren't the same. So, I mean, you had that back then. It's just in this day and age, I want everybody's talking about video games going digital and how it's held on to its analog media for far too long. But I look at a gaming thing is not the same as like a movie. I can watch a movie that's 20 years old on my TV today still. but I'm not playing a digital 20-year-old game on my Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo to date. So, technology change. That cart can no longer just, I can't just pull out a Nintendo SNES game and plug it into my Switch, So, but, Nick, you got anything else to add to this about PlayStation controlling their ecosystem a little bit tighter?
No, not really. Just, like you were saying at the end there, game preservation is highly important.
All right. Cool. So, let us know what you think. How do you feel about Sony being able to tell these developers what they can and can't create and put on their store? They can create whatever they want, but Sony won't put it on their store. Let us know what you think about that. Whether you're in favor of it or not, I can see both sides. Are you like us? Can you see both sides, or you lean more to one side than the other? So let us know what you think down in the comments of this video, and, as always, keep coming along with us. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so that, you can follow along with us and hit that bell for notifications so that every time we put out a new video, you get alerted. And don't forget to like this video. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to catch you in the next one.